Today is May 3rd in the year 2010. I'm Karen Herman with the Archive of American Television, and it is my great pleasure today to be interviewing Nancy Malone in Toluca Lake, California. Okay. So we're going to start right from the beginning, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
First question is, what was your name at birth?
Let me think. Who was I at birth is more like it. My name at birth was Anne Josepha Malone.
And
there you go.
Okay, and how did it become Nancy Malone?
Well, I think that was a mouthful for any radio shows, which I was doing when I was a young actress. And it didn't sound really musical enough. And the teacher that I had when I was growing up, learning to be on the radio, had suggested that I change it to Nancy Malone. Anne is actually Nancy. Nancy's the nickname of Anne. And since I was born on St. Joseph's Day, my mother, of course, had to call me Josepha. So that was a little much. So it just turned out to be Nancy Malone. And the Y, just the two N's, Nancy, Malone. So that's how it became Nancy Malone. Not that far away.
Now, when was that credit first used for you? How old were you?
Well, let's see. I think when I was 10, I was on the cover of Life magazine, and I think on the inside of the cover, they used my old name. So it must have been just after 10. It must have been about 11 or 12, actually, when I was into the radio business. So Nancy Malone became it.
When and where were you born?
Queens Village, Long Island.
You want to give us a date?
No.
Okay.
That was fast. Gee, her reactions are very fast. Yeah.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your parents, their names.
I mean,
and
it's
what they
all
did.
out there on IMDb, so I mean, what's the big difference? But there you go. I just say it, I can't say it. Anyway.
Okay, tell me about your parents, their names and what they did.
My parents, okay. What a nice question. My father, James, was a longshoreman in New York. He was down at the docks. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, the kindest, sweetest, most generous man in the whole world. I mean, if he had 2 nickels, he'd give you both of them. And real literally, he had given shirts off his back to his fellow workers and things. He was just a great guy. My mother used to kill him, of course, because he did think of a lot of other people sometimes before the family, but it was still part of his generous, kind nature. And my mother, who was the smartest woman in the entire world, was born in Ireland, in a place called Crossmaglen, in Northern Ireland, County Armagh. And she was one of 10. She was she wasn't the youngest, she was the next in line to be the youngest. And her parents, my grandparents, all died. Both of them died when she was very young. And the children were all scattered about to aunts and uncles and anybody who would take them. And my mother went to work as a little girl to take care of another person's children. And the story goes, she had a stiff leg, which was, they had taken the kneecap out because having red hair, it goes with the personality. And she loved to go out and ice skate because they didn't own ice skates, but they would skate on the pond anyway. And she fell and didn't tell her employer that she had hurt her knee. So apparently after a great while it got swollen and they took her into the doctor and they had to take the kneecap out. So she had this stiff leg all her life, but she loved to dance and nobody ever knew she had a stiff leg. She flew around the place like a madwoman, and she was terrific. So her name was Winifred Shields. And she had many names. She liked, her other name was Bridget as well. And she liked, her grandchildren used to call her Tina. So I'd say, who are you? Who's it? Tina, Bridget, Winifred, Nancy? And then she put Nancy onto it. So she had a number of names, but her humor was infectious and her smarts were unbelievable. Just plain, she never went to school. And she would tell stories about how the older children would come back from school and they were the only ones that had shoes. So everybody else had to wait till the older ones came back so that they could go out, because then they had shoes to go out in. So it was, I would say, a family that lived by their wits. And then my mother's older sisters had come from Ireland to America, as was tradition in those days, and they had the money to come on steerage, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio style. I don't think they found any Leonardo DiCaprios on the boat, but anyway, they got to Staten Island, where a lot of the Irish people wound up. And when they got jobs, they saved enough money to send for the other ones. So everybody arrived in America, and except I had one aunt who stayed in Ireland, but the rest all came and made their way.
What do you think you inherited from your parents in terms of your personality and traits?
Well, I'll go with my dad first. I think I learned or inherited his generosity, his spirit, and his kind of overseeing the problems of others. He wasn't a very well educated man. He had a hard job in the cold on those docks, and like a lot of Irishmen, he had a drinking problem, but he was never abusive, or we never even knew about it for a long time. My mother kept it from us because what would happen is that when he was very bad and he got drunk, he wouldn't come home. He was ashamed. So he would call and say he wasn't coming home, and he'd stay at a hotel or whatever. And then he became Alcoholics Anonymous and was clean for, 20, 25 years after that. But he was a great, great man, great courage, and sweet and affectionate. And it's hard when you have a kind of man like that. A lot of people don't measure up to those kinds of attributes today. And he was very special. My mom, again, amazing. Her humor, I think, first of all, has gotten me out of a lot of trouble. And her humor was just infectious and delicious and wonderful. She tells a story about once she was driving down a one-way street. And of course the police sirens were blaring in the back, and they caught up with her and they said, "Madam, you're driving down a one-way street." And she says, "Well, I'm only going one way." And he let her off without the ticket. I mean, she was a very quick-witted, got out of a lot of scrapes kind of woman. And terrific, just terrific. So I got a humor from her, and I got a kind of way of thinking and a logic that she was able to impart to me of how to figure things out. So, great lady.
And did you have siblings?
I had two brothers who, sadly, both of them passed away within 11 months of each other, just a couple of months ago. They're both older than me. And neither of them entertained the idea of being in show business. That was not even the remotest thought in their mind.
Well, as a kid, then, how did you get into show business? What kind of kid were you?
I was fabulous. No, I was, I think, a normal, average kid. I went to Our Lady of Lourdes parochial school, and until about the 7th or 8th grade. And then I was working so much, I had to go to professional children's school. But how it all happened was my brother Roger, who was the younger of the two, was caddying at the golf course to make extra pin money, I guess. And this gentleman had a conversation, who used to caddy for a rather wealthy man, called my brother over to his side one day, and he said, you could make a lot of money for college if you cared to. I have a friend, and I know it all sounds very suspicious in our thinking today, but in those days there weren't as many kind of strange people out there. And he said, I have a friend who could probably use you in a commercial way. Because he had red hair and freckles. He was very cute. And so he said, tell your mother to please call me and let me talk to her about this. Well, my brother came back and told my mother this, and she says, you're not going back to the golf course, that's it. I don't want you talking to strange people, blah, blah, blah. And so my brother, of course, did not adhere to her advice and went back and caddied some more. And the fellow said, what is the matter with your mother? I mean, he said, give me her phone number. So my brother reluctantly gave the man the phone number, and he called. He said, look it, Mrs. Malone, your kid is great looking with freckles. And he says, I will have pictures taken. You will come with him. We will take these pictures of headshots, and I'm going to send them to my friend. And let's see if the kid can make some money for school. So this was about 6 months of this man calling. So finally, my mother had no one to leave me with. So she went into Long Island City, and this man had owned not only the building, but the block that the building sat upon. And he had his photographer do these pictures, and they went to John Robert Powers, who was at that time the biggest modeling agency in the world. The photographer felt a little sorry for me, and he took some pictures of me, and no teeth, and the red hair everywhere with the rings and the ringlets and everything, and sent them in. And the next day, I got a call, and they said, can you bring your daughter in immediately? We have a lot of things for her to do. So my mother was thrown into this as a big surprise, and I took off, and my brother said, I'm not going anywhere near that. And that was that. End of story, beginning of career.
Did your brother get a call like that too? Or was it just
he went on one call for Kellogg's or something like that, and he said, this is sissy work, I'm not going, So that was that. It was career over and out.
So what about you? Did you take to it like a duck to water?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's attractive because you're not going to school. I mean, that's the best part of it. And I found it marvelous, and for some reason or other, I had no trouble with your camera and lights and people telling me you hold the spoon up higher and, all of that sort of thing. It was terrific. And as I said, I worked constantly. I just finished giving almost 40 boxes to UCLA they have all my papers now, and I look back at some of this has jogged my memory, and I thought, my God, I never stopped. I never stopped working. And it was a great experience. And I dare say during some very rough times at home when there was very little money, I think sort of a lot of the modeling money sort of helped pay some of the bills and the phone bills and electric and stuff like that. So it was good. It was supposed to have happened. It happened right, and there it was.
Talk a little about Life magazine and how that came about.
Well, again, I was the most popular child model, ever, and in New York. And a Life magazine called. They were doing the 10th anniversary issue. And they wanted a young child to be holding the first issue of Life magazine, which was a photograph taken by Margaret Burke White. And I think Philip Halsman took the picture. And there was a young boy, and myself were interviewed for this honor. And it was to show the typical American child. In those days, it was more typical American look than today, when we have a much different multicultural look. And so they saw me, and I'd come from school, and I had a sweater on with a hole in the sleeve, from a moth, I guess, and the pigtails and the little ribbons hanging, and they said, we want you to do this. To my mother, she didn't tell me. I mean, what I know. So they arranged to have me come into the studio, and they took some shots, and that was it. So we have the cover.
Were you recognized after that point? Were the people know who you were?
Well, as a moment of ego, I remember, getting on the, we would, be on the subway from New York, going at home at night, and, they used to put the big weights on papers and the magazines, and I'm going along, there's the Life magazine on the tables or whatever, those little stands. And I sort of moved the weight over because it was right on the face. Oh, the ego here, At 12 or 10 I was. Yeah. Oh, yeah, people recognized me.
Did you feel that you were the typical all-American child?
No, because I had a home life, which come home, do your homework, and get to bed kind of life. So I didn't have any, which I find so difficult for the kids in Hollywood today or, wherever, because they're constantly pressured and constantly hounded, and I don't know necessarily what their upbringing is like, but we were very strict upbringing, We had the family ate together, and it was bedtime and homework.
Did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I had no vision of becoming an executive or a director or a producer or continuing in the acting field. I didn't have that vision. It was something like a wonderful wave as things happened. I was ready for them and just sort of accepted them as part of what my life was. But when I started to act, I became devoted to it and did a lot of studying and worked very hard as an actor. I never walked through it like a lot of the kids today seem to do. And because to me it was an art form. And when you're studying with Strasberg and Stella Adler, and I was an invited member of the Actors Studio when I was 13, and James Dean did his first job with me on a Hallmark. He had a walk-on with 2 lines, I think. And, I've worked with some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful actors, serious actors. And, so that meant a lot to me. I really, really was, I was really ripe for being an actor. It captured my imagination. It captured my intelligence in terms of technique and learning technique, and appreciating great acting as versus just plain acting. So it certainly was God's finger. I always think of myself as Ms. Adam, in the great Michelangelo painting in the Sistine Chapel when God is putting his finger like this. I go saying, Queens Village, Long Island, and here I am. I mean, how did that happen? But it's destiny. It is destiny.
At what point did you decide to go into the acting part of it?
Well, it's an excellent question again that you ask, because being so popular as a child model and then starting and doing radio, I was signed by William Morris, and they were putting together a show. This is your television question here. In those days, they didn't have a lot of studios in New York, and the studio that was very busy was in a department store called Wanamaker's. And they were putting together, Dumont Television was putting together a show to demonstrate to Boston merchants and shopkeepers that television, I almost choke when I say this, can be used for commercial purposes. And so they flew me and Jesse White, we used to do those commercials for the washing machines, and Bill Lynn and a number of wonderful actors up to MIT, where they were able to put cameras together, and they made a half-hour dramatic show. We all studied the lines, we all rehearsed, and I would have loved to have seen, I would have loved somebody to have made a kinescope or something. But we did this half-hour show, and I think there was another part to it too, but I don't remember that. What I do remember is that MIT had doors that you just walked through and they'd open, and they'd walk out and they'd close. I was the most fascinating part of the whole experience for me. So we did the show. It was transmitted to the Boston Statler Hilton Hotel, I think, to their luncheon. And the merchants then, I guess, said, wow, we can sell, soap suds here, or we could sell clothes here, or whatever. And then they flew us all back, Dumont did, to New York. And then Dumont had asked me if I could do another show for them. And it was a show about a father and daughter, not unlike the old Mr. Wizard show. And the father would show the little girl how to fix things and how to make stuff and what have you. So it was a series. I think we did about, 5 or 6 of them, wherever they are buried today, who knows. But then that really started it. And then William Morris really got on the fast track with me, and I started acting. And I had not gone to any formal training at that point. Actually, I did not start studying till, really after my first Hallmark live show. That was where James Dean had a small part.
Do you remember the title of it?
Forgotten Children. And live. UCLA has a copy of it, and I saw it. I had to laugh because the sets, how we do elaborate sets today, the sets were like cardboard with black pen indicating a door and a window. I mean, this is a high-priced show, and it wasn't supposed to be stylized. I mean, that was it. But Cloris Leachman was in it, and Sarah Churchill, Winston Churchill's daughter, I think she was the host. And it was very classy. It was on Sunday afternoons, and they did these great dramas.
What was your part in that one?
The story was about Mount Berry School in Georgia, and a girl, I can't remember her first name, but it was named after her, and that was Cloris. And she met this little mountain girl who would come to her mansion when they were having balls and parties and all of that sort of thing, and look and be envious of the fact that all of this beautiful event was going on, and she was not part of it, and she was on the hills. And so the idea was that Miss Berry decided to start a school because of this girl. And so I was all through it as the person that was her inspiration. It's a great, lovely script.
And you said that after that you went into formal acting training?
Yeah, well, by that time I had done a lot of shows even before Hallmark, and I had wanted to get into the actor studio. And when they knew about me, because I don't know how many actresses of that age range were working, but I had friends who were at the studio, and they said, we would like to, promote you to come to the studio. So I'm, living at home all this time, going back and forth to Long Island, and those are classes that were late sometimes. So I had to, really beg my mother to let me do this, and so I did. I started classes then, and then shortly thereafter, I got into a play, my first play, which I was the lead, and played that for a year with the great Melvin Douglas. And that, when I finished that play and then went out on tour, when I came back, I started studying with Stella Adler. And Stella remained my teacher for as long as she lived.
What's the most important thing that you learned from her?
Oh my God, that would take another 2 days to tell you that. Style, probably, which is, I think, pretty much evaporated into the kick-ass kind of movies of the day. And to be able to recognize the size of people. If you see a performance and it has size, most people don't understand what you mean by that. It's not like a size 8. It's size of structure, of strength, of character, of interpretation, of intelligence. And though the parts that young actresses are required today to play, I don't know necessarily that they accommodate size. But it really is up to the individual performer to find the size, even if it isn't written. And that, I think, is sadly dismissed. But she was the greatest. Well, ask De Niro and ask all those people there. They're still carrying on her legacy.
Did that also help you as a director later on?
Oh, yeah. Very much so. Yeah, because, you know, a good actor, a really good actor, and I dare say I'm humble enough not to say great, but a good, great actor is a great director because they're inside the skin of the person that they're working with. They also understand the psychic pain of an actor. If an actor is an actor, not just, you know, I won't say kick ass again, but, you know, that level of, I haven't seen the picture, so I shouldn't criticize it, but that level of actor. I think you always have to strive, and I wish somehow there could be a billboard somewhere that says to these young actors, strive to be great. Even if you're not required to by the script, strive to find something, you know, that expands you.
Going back to those early days in live television, you appeared on almost all of the anthologies and of the day. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe with like Lux Video Theater, a few of those types of roles.
Sure. I mean, you have to realize those were live television. And, you know, I have a thing about time. I'm always on time or early. And some of my friends criticize me all the time. Oh, geez, she's going to come, she's going to be early. God, is she going to be on time? You know, it's just built in because when it got to be 8 o'clock, you were on the air. Not 5 after, not 5 2, you know. So a lot of the early television instilled good habits, I think, in me anyway. And they were wonderful. I mean, they were scary as hell, but wonderful. I mean, the adrenaline rush when you finally got down to, okay, you know, you're up for touch-up and your makeup, and you did the run-through, the last run-through, and then you have a half an hour break to run to the bathroom or do whatever, and then you come down on the floor and you have 10 minutes, and you know at 10 minutes of 8, you only have 10 more minutes to live. And at 8 o'clock is the guillotine, you know, so, but you know what it did? It kind of instilled a great rush, you know, to a performance. You know, you were really up there all the time. And I loved it. All those craft days and craft television theater and all those early days were wonderful. And the dramas were pretty darn good. They really were good.
Is there anyone that you were in that stands out in your mind?
Well, let's see. Of course, I've done so many. There was one funny story. There was a program called the Elgin Hour, which was brought to you by Elgin Watch Company. And it was called, I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, it was a story of a father-daughter and their relationship and the father's problems and how he translated his problems to his daughter. Not necessarily for the best, but they had a very kind of tough relationship. So the show starts, the curtain starts, and it's at a prom, and the daughter is dancing with her father, and they have a kind of nice conversation, and then the story opens, Act 1, and blah blah blah. Okay, so we rehearse. Everything's great. You know, you rehearse a week down in a rehearsal studio, and the director blocks, you know, everything, puts everything on tape on the ground, and you know where the door is and where the house is and all that stuff, because you don't see sets until, you know, a day before. And so he said, this is the prom, the school and the gym, and this is where the prom is, and this is where you will start dancing, and this is the father, and this is so. And fine, everything's great. So, okay, now we go downstairs for the show. Okay, it's airtime. No father. No. The actor wasn't around. The actor had, I think, some problems with a liquid form, and he wasn't there. So I could hear in the control, and I could see the crane ready, and the poor cameraman operator going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I start? And then I could hear the stage runner going, Nancy, do something. I can dance with myself. I do, So everybody's flying in and out of doors, trying to find the father. And so the 8 o'clock came, curtain, and we started. And I went over to somebody sitting there, poor actor, didn't know what the heck hit him. And I said, would you like to dance? Jeez. And of course we danced, and they found him, and they pushed him in off camera. And then he said, may I have this dance? Wow. That was a fun experience. And I tell you, it tells you how to think on your feet real fast in those days. We all had those experiences. We all did. Amazing. I was doing Robert Montgomery Presents, which I understand they burned all those tapes and kinescopes because they had to make room for other stuff. And it just kills me. That stuff is so historic. Not my stuff, but just the whole show in itself, the whole series. And this was my first grown-up role after coming back from Time Out for Ginger, the play I was doing. And there was a sequence where this young girl, it was a story of a young girl who couldn't hear. It was period, it was the 20s. And her boss was in love with her, and very handsome, gorgeous man. And he would say lovely things to her, and she ignored him, because she obviously couldn't hear what he was saying. So he was very hurt and thought she didn't love him or didn't like him or wasn't interested. So her girlfriend says to her, are you a fool? I mean, he's after you, he wants you, what's the matter? She said, I didn't know. So she finds a doctor in Europe, and she goes to him to get a hearing aid, which came in a box like this, and earphones and something ugly. So, okay, we're doing this. And, of course, as I said, live television and 18,000 changes. You would, as you go from one scene to the next, somebody would throw a dress on you, or they'd pull your clothes off, and they'd put something else on you and push you into the next set. And I was supposed to be sitting at a cafe in Europe smoking, pondering what was going to happen now that I got a hearing aid, and if I was going to fall in love with this man once I got back and heard what he had to say. And I smoked Viceroy in those days, which was a cigarette with an amazing long filter, which was not period, of course. So the prop man says to me, what cigarettes do you want me to put in the purse? He says, what do you smoke? I said, I smoke Viceroy. He said, okay, I'll have all those Viceroy. Not thinking, of course, that they were not in vogue in the 20s, right? So I'm getting in the scene, and it starts in a major close-up, and it pulls back, and there she is smoking the thing. And of course, without my glasses, which I can't see a thing, I lit the cork end of the cigarette. Here we go. So you see these flames coming up. The shot. And as I'm sitting there with the flames, I can see the flames, and I'm going, oh my God, and I have lines, And I say, oh, they don't make them very good at putting it out like this under the frame of the camera, and then as you start to turn green and your eyes cross from the horrible smoking of the filter, it was a moment, because the guys were off camera going, So amazing things like that would happen when in live television, but it was exciting.
Was there a type that you played? Was there something you were always kind of cast as?
they more or less, when there was a really good acting role, I got those, luckily enough, more than just, your average teenager. But I got those as well, because that's what I was. I was playing, myself in a lot of these things. But I lucked out by having a lot of character parts, which I loved, of course.
You also did matinee theater.
Yes.
Remember that experience?
Yeah, I did several of those. Dean Stockwell, who was a very big movie star when he was a kid, and also recently, I think he did a series, and we used to get paired together a lot. Dean and Dwayne Hickman, who was another big star as a child in movies, and those matinee theaters were wonderful, just wonderful. Albert McCleary was the director, and his concept of putting those shows together was unlike anything I'd ever seen or ever seen since. He didn't use sets. He used furniture, and everything flew. That is to say, it was on wires. So if you walked into a limbo set, which had nothing in it but black velour in the back, all of a sudden a picture frame would drop down in the back, and some grips would push in a chair, under camera or beside camera, and you'd sit and you'd do the scene. And I mean, the grips were like from the National Ballet Company, because they had to, I'm kidding, but they had to be so precise and so in tune with the actors' timing. Because if you did it one way in rehearsal and somehow or other you did it differently, they were so sharp. They could tell if you walked differently, to quick get it faster or go slower with pushing the chair under the frame of the camera. And remarkable crew he had. And I never saw people love a director as much as they loved this man. He was so good to them and so kind. Well, he knew he had incredible crew. And those were great. Those were great days. They were great shows to do. So creative.
You also did some of the early soaps, the first 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how old I was with that. That was the first soap, actually, on television. I did that for a while, and then I did, I think, The Brighter Day for a while, and then Guiding Light for a while. But I had to leave one of them. I'm not sure it was Guiding Light or Brighter Day, to go to California to do a pilot. And that was my end of soaps.
What was it like working on a soap in those early days? They're all live and...
Yeah, it was, again, great. There was a fellow actor whom I had a mad crush with, and they were so good to me because I did a lot of improvisation on the soaps. And, once they got over the shock and horror of us doing this, but we had such great chemistry. Joe Cirola, his name was, that he played a gangster, and of course I was the minister's daughter. Great, of course. How can you miss with a plot like that? And we would improvise a lot of the stuff, and they let us do it because we weren't crazy. We were within character, and I loved it. I had a great time. One time, you remind me, I had a dog named Sunshine. She was named after a waiter who never smiled. And I used to bring Sunshine to the set all the time. And you rehearse, you have a couple of run-throughs and blocking and all of that stuff, and I'd put Sunshine on a chair, either in the scene or not. She was very well behaved, and she sat and never barked, never did anything. And then you'd go up, you break, and you go upstairs, the makeup, and then you come down for the air. I forgot her. So we come down for the air. In the middle of the scene, I look over. There's the dog looking at me. Oh, I said, I better not say anything or look at her because she'll come over. And it was pretty hard to explain in the middle of the scene. Oh, and by the way, I just got a dog before. So little things like that would happen. And everybody was so wonderful, and nobody made a fuss, and it was great.
I heard you were doing all of this television. Did you have any aspirations to go into film or become a Hollywood actress at that point?
Well, whilst I was doing the television, I was doing theater. And that really was my love. I mean, I adored that. No, I think because I was so much at home, with my parents and growing up, and having such a successful career in television and the theater, I never really got into wanting to come out to California, particularly until I did start to come out here. But I was very busy, and it never was something that I envied particularly. I have no reason to, just didn't.
But you were working pretty constantly, right? Tell us how Naked City came about for you.
How did it come about?
For you.
Well, as I said, when you're sort of visible as an actor and desirable as an actor, you get called. And Marion Dougherty, the greatest casting woman that ever lived, called my agent and said they're very interested in Nancy for a series. And it's the first time they've shot in New York City on the street, and it'll be a very, engaging series, and there's going to be some wonderful people. She'll be the only woman. She'll be the leading lady, and, what do you think? So I went to meet them, and I liked everybody enormously. They were terrific. And Howard Rodman and Sterling Silliphant were the writers. You can't beat those two. They were the kings of the script in those days. They were brilliant writers. So they signed me right away, and then I auditioned the leading man. So I had a lot of wonderful guys that came in to read for the part, and as soon as Paul Berg walked in the room, I thought, you better not go any further. This was the guy for this part. He was charming, he was funny, he was cute, and we had a wonderful time together. It was one of the best working relationships I've ever had. I adored him. And I must say, he kind of liked me too.
Now, had you watched the earlier version of Naked City before?
No. I mean, I knew it existed, but it's not a show that I watched particularly.
And talk about your character, her strengths, her weaknesses, her background.
Well, what was fun about it, of course, that Howard Rodman, who was a fan of mine that I didn't know about, wrote this character really based on a lot of me. She was an actress, and she had a sense of humor. And she was a little bit of a smart mouth, And he used to watch me a lot, and sort of kind of molded the character about, not to be too flattering to myself, but he would really kind of pick stuff, of my own personality to write, and. I loved her. She was wonderful. And as I said, people would write to me and say, "My God, the relationship between you two, are you married? Are you lovers? Are you?" I said, "Well, I can't answer all those questions, but I love him a lot." And we were very, 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 very good friends. And as a matter of fact, Paul recently passed away, and I did his eulogy, which was not an easy thing to do. But it was an amazing relationship. And, in those days, you didn't do just, 22 shows a year. We had 1 month off in an hour series, and it was a full hour, not like 42 minutes or whatever it is today. We had, very few commercials, and the commercials that they had were, substantial. So there would be a car commercial that really sponsored a lot of the show. And So we had like 3 or 4 commercials, I think, during an hour. So it was full hours. And, you know, it was very tough on the crew. They had a hard time. It was bitter cold. I mean, I remember Paul and I standing on the street in New York downtown waiting for a script. I mean, the camera was set up, a cameraman, Jack Priestley, God rest his soul, was my love. And all the crew standing by, and they would send the stunt driver to LaGuardia Airport to pick up the scripts. They were all written in California. So we'd be standing there, and of course me with the little high heels and the little stockings and the whole thing, freezing my buns, dying. And I'd scream at Paul, "You're wearing long underwear, and I'm freezing." And they would drive in with a police escort, hand us the pages. We'd go off in the corner, learn them quick. Okay, ready, shoot. And those are amazingly challenging days, really. But there was such a freshness to the show. And as I said, Paul and I used to do a little improv too. And, you know, they didn't have all of the posh kind of accoutrements that they have today for actors. Before we got a honey wagon, which was in our last year, and that's a big long trailer for those people who don't know the expression, where they have dressing rooms. I was dressing in store shops that they would open for me at 5 a.m. And then one morning, I'll never forget, we were in Wall Street on location, and they opened the store. It was closed. The store actually was out of business, so they got permission to go in there and use it as a dressing room. So I'm in there at 5 o'clock in the morning, changing, putting the stockings on. No pantyhose in those days, stockings, you know, so the legs are everywhere, putting the stockings on. And a bus pulls up to the front window with the people going to work. And there I am. Hello, thank you. There I am. They thought, what are we buying in that store? But, you know, things like that would happen. And you know, but nobody got serious about it. You know, we all took it in good spirits.
How much of the show would you say was filmed on location?
A lot. Yeah. And not, you know, today where you can throw a little digital camera in your purse or in your pocket. They had the big Mitchells and big Mitchell cameras, and the greatest sound man that ever walked the face of the earth. His name was Mo. And he been dealing with the dialogue in the city of New York with traffic and horns and stuff like that in those days. Not the sophisticated equipment they have today. You never had looped, ever. You never had to go back and loop. He'd come in, he'd see the scene, and he'd say to me, "Nancy, talk into the salsa." Talk into the salsa, or talk over there in the pepper. That would be it. Okay, got it. We were all so happy to be working and having a good time and a good show we were proud of.
Were people on the street, were they constantly watching, causing any kind of issues in terms of just seeing something being filmed on the street? I
think the people that did stop and watch were always very, you know, impressed with, you know, the amount of people. It always said, why does it take so many people to do this, you know? That would be the question. Because everybody's got a very important job to do. But, you know, it was exciting to see. Not today, they don't bother that much, because I think there's been so many shows over, I don't know what, shooting in New York, so many shows shooting in New York now.
For someone who hasn't seen the series, can you describe it?
Well, it had Horace McMahon, who was the older detective, Harry Belliver, who was his partner, and Paul Burke, the young detective, the young upstart, the girl, as they used to refer to the women in those days. And I'm just laughing at something. It was a story of the city, of what really would go on in the city with people. Not necessarily crimes, though some of them involved crimes, but there were stories. I remember Maureen Stapleton starred in one, and I think she was a person who was attempting suicide, and how the police would get involved in each story. These 4 these three detectives, and I entered into it as Paul's girlfriend. And so they would have a break from the storytelling of the crime or the story itself, with these vignettes of Paul, Adam Flint, and Libby, her name was. And those are the pieces everybody used to look forward to, those romantic moments.
How do you think it compared to a man-woman relationship of its time?
In what way do you mean?
Just in the sense of they seemed more real, let's say. There's a little more give and take than in a lot of other series that were going on at the time that had male-female relationships happening.
Well, that's because Paul Burke and Nancy Malone were crazy people who loved each other as people and trusted each other as actors. And so we'd given each other license to attempt certain things that were not so formula. And that's what made it so beautiful. It was improvisation, and it was, we knew our characters so well. And, we allowed each other the room to play.
Can you give an example of that, of that playfulness?
Yes. There was a scene where I think Paul had to go and the character of Adam had to go and buy a suit. And at that time, Mel Brooks had come out with a 2,000-Year-Old Man, the record with Carl Reiner. Both Paul and I would play it constantly. We just loved it so much and screamed. Our humor was the same. So we started to do readings from the 2,000-Year-Old Man, like Mel Brooks. In other words, saying, hello, how are you? That's what we'd start to do, instead of, Libby saying, well, hello, how are you? So we would throw a couple of these in every now and then. So this one day, the scene was he goes and he's being measured for his suit. And Libby's with him, and the man who's playing the tailor says, what size do you think, Adam wears? And my line is, he's probably going to be some 40, I think, something like that. So my line came out, he's not yet, he might be, he could be 40. Paul, who didn't know that I was going to do this, of course, collapses laughing. We're shooting, right? And then he comes around and gives me, he says, she's wrong. I could be, maybe I could be 40. And so we would do little shtick like that, which thank God, we were working with wonderful people who said, don't get carried away. Once in a while, it's all right, but don't get carried away with this shtick that you do. But we had little fun times like that, which, in essence, it really showed our relationship, both Paul's and mine, and Adam's and Libby's, freedom and love with each other. So it worked.
Do you have a favorite episode of the series?
Oh boy. I can't say that I have a favorite episode, because they were all my favorite episodes. I just loved them. I loved the people that were hired too. As I said, Marion Doherty, who discovered Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford, and a few other 1,000 people. Really brought in great guest stars. And when I wasn't actually working, I would go and I'd watch them work, which nobody does today. You know what they say when I'm directing? What time am I through? You're so lucky to have a job. And then I let it go.
Well, I did ask you about your favorite episodes. So do you have one, or do you have a favorite scene, or what stands out to you from your experience?
I haven't seen them in a long time, so I'd have to kind of sit down and look at some of them. But I don't know. I had such a good time with all of them that I don't really have a favorite.
Were you recognized on the street for that character?
I was recognized in Bloomingdale's a lot when I went in to buy a hosiery. Oh, Nancy, yes, I did get recognized restaurants.
Did people ever comment on your characters? Or call you
No,
by a
what they would
character
say is, and I get a lot of fan mail today that says, you know, we loved you so much, and there's one person that wrote to me. He says, "My father was so my father, I love that. My father was so in love with you that my mother used to get angry." I'd say, well, I didn't do anything, but most of the people just loved our relationship. I loved the characters, so it was successful.
You also, during that time, were on The Guiding Light. You were doing both roles.
This was one for the books. I was doing Guiding Light, and I was doing Naked City, and I was doing a play at night. And what made it tricky was that when the play was out of town, everybody was wonderfully cooperative. I would get on the train to Boston I'd fly to Boston out of LaGuardia at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 5 o'clock. I'd make it to the theater. The performance was on. I'd get a train at 11:30 at night down to Grand Central. I would race to the apartment, change, shower, go to Guiding Light, do my thing. Naked City, they would arrange to have me do a scene either first thing in the morning or right after that before I got on the plane to go back to Boston. Now, this didn't happen for a long time, but it happened about 3 or 4 times. And I made it work. I didn't know who I was at the end of those 4. I said, what script is this? Who am I? But, you did what you had to do.
Did you enjoy your time on Guiding Light?
I did. Yeah, I did. There was some nice people to work for.
What was your character?
Robin. I think there was a succession of Robins through the years, but yeah, Robin it was fun to do.
You also, in 1964, you appeared on The Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that.
I guess that's considered one of the classics. There's a Twilight Zone convention, which I have never attended, but have been asked to for years and years and years and years and years. And I always kind of reluctantly and politely refused to go to these conventions because I think, people are going to go, they're going to see this very thin, very beautiful, blonde Tootsie. And here I am today, somewhat older and a little more of me. And they're going to go, oh, well, that's what you look like today. And I said, I'm not, my ego doesn't handle that too well. So, to answer your question, I finally was persuaded to go. And this woman said to me, they said, we'll provide all the pictures. You don't have to bring pictures. We'll get all the pictures. All you need to do is sign them and be nice. Just say, thank you very much. And I said, okay. And they said, well, you can make money. I said, great, breast cancer. Okay, I have a sign made that says, all of these pictures will be signed, and they're $20, and it's going to breast cancer. So I said, now I can do it. I couldn't do it any other way, but that would work for me. So I go there. It's jammed. It's packed. And I wouldn't go both days. I only go Sunday. So I brought somebody with me because I said, I'm not touching money. I can't. That would offend me. But it's going into the breast cancer pocket, and there it is, a big thing that says breast cancer on it. And it did. It went all off. So this man came up to me. This is such a lesson in humility. And he said to me, do you know, I'm from Sweden, and I'm here to see some of the Twilight Zone actors, and, and I've wanted to see you because your show is my favorite. And I stayed over because you weren't here on Saturday to meet you. I felt that big. I said, I'll pay the rent. I'll pay your hotel. He said, no. people don't know the responsibility they have as actors.
Stop here and change the tape.